I really think that this is an inflection point in the market. I know it's very popular to get on stage and say that it's an inflection point like every single year, but it really is one. We really do see things tipping. The nature of our conversations is changing in a really watershed way. And we think that we're the ones who are kind of poised to step in at this moment. And we think that EY is the place. We really think that we're the ones that can help shape the future of legal services. We think that this is the time, and we think that EY is the place.
A bit of a tremor rolled through the legal industry recently when Thomson Reuters announced that it had sold its managed services business, Pangea3, to global Big Four professional services firm Ernst & Young, a sign perhaps of Ernst & Young's continuing expansion into legal services. Today we'll talk with two of the leaders of Pangea3, Joe Borstein, Global Director, and Ed Sohn, Vice President of Product and Partner Management. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to the interview in just a moment, but first, a short shout out to the sponsors who make this podcast possible. Joe Borstein, welcome to LawNext.
Thanks, Bob. I've been following your stories for years, and it's really an honor to be on your show.
Thanks. And Ed Sohn, welcome to you.
Very good to be here, Bob.
Joe, I actually thought that when I had you on, we'd be talking about the legal echo chamber, but I guess that's another conversation, right?
That's an endless debate.
That's an endless debate. So I introduced you by titles, and as I understand it, you're both still at Thomson Reuters. You're still in transition. So where are you right now? Where is this deal in the process of happening?
Well, Bob, the letter of intent has been inked, but the transaction is still in the midst of closing. There are a number of things that go into closing a transaction, as you may well know, and we're getting really excited to transition people over. Including ourselves, and getting to know sort of the new home and all of that. And so, a divestiture and an acquisition is oftentimes a complicated thing, but we're really, really excited, and we're all really focused in and cannot wait to get over there and get started.
Bob, I would just add that from the point of view of the market, the entire traditional Pangea3 team is coming over together. So it's exciting to kind of step into this next chapter of our story as an entire intact team.
Yeah. Do you have a timeline for when this is going to happen?
Yeah, the transaction is expected to close in the second quarter of 2019. That's subject to a variety of closing conditions, but we feel pretty confident.
And just by way of background, could you just describe to me what roles each of you have within Pangea3? Joe, let's kind of start with you.
Sure. So as global director, I manage a worldwide business development team. That team consists mostly of former practicing lawyers, some of which who practiced at top am law firms for anywhere between 3 and 10 years. What they do for the most part is go into corporate counsel and major law firms and kind of talk about, consult, and understand how they can use the manpower, the process expertise, and more the technology expertise of our global teams to do better work, win more RFPs, and maybe get home in time for dinner. I also have a director of innovation role that I picked up in the last year, where I kind of help integrate some of our services and our offerings at Thomson Reuters with things in the broader legal startup community through things like proof of concepts.
Is that something that will continue after you transition? Yeah, I was going to get to that actually. But is that innovation role something that will transition over to Ernst & Young? Do you know, or?
I've been assured that innovation will be a big part of my role there as well. And we'll talk a little bit about the combination of the member firms with the 1,000+ full-time lawyers and process experts at Pangea. There will be a lot of kind of green space to innovate, I think.
Yeah. And Ed, what's your role?
So I oversee our product management and partnerships function. So that what that means is making sure that our managed service lines in litigation investigations, managed document review, as well as in contracts and also in compliance, and all three of those lines of service that we deliver to the market, that they have the technology that they need to be enabled introducing automation and scale, efficiency, and greater accuracy in the delivery of our services. And so that's my current role. A part of that has been a build or buy kind of function, and doing an analysis on how to pair product to best tech enable our services. That keeps me in the market, keeps me abreast of what's happening with various legal technology. And the other side of my role is in partnerships. So oftentimes when we go to the market and we have a third-party technology partner, there is sort of the typical partnership there where, we're users and procurers of that, but also really seeking to find innovative ways to go to market together, to find opportunities where we can serve clients together, and where we can engage and really be in sync beyond just a business relationship. And so that's also kind of within my remit.
How would you describe what Pangea3 is? I mean, it was founded in 2004. One of the earliest, if not the first, is kind of managed services firm. But Joe, let me start with you. How do you describe what it is you do?
Sure. I like to think of Pangea3 as a high-end legal support company for virtually all types of law. So I think we frequently get cubbyholed into a litigation document review business, and certainly that is a tremendous and profitable and part of the business we're extremely proud of. But the company was originally started by David Perla and Sanjay Kamlani. Neither of them were litigators. What they had was a vision of being able to do extremely high quality work in parts of the world where you could get extremely smart people and pair those people with true process expertise. And process expertise has become a buzzword in the US, but it simply wasn't 10 years ago. There wasn't, outside of manufacturing, a drive in the services world to map out processes and do things right time and time again. And to use technology to track errors and reduce them time and time again, and improve efficiency time and time again. So, whatever it is we support, be it litigation, or M&A diligence, or contract lifecycle management, we throw a process behind it that is robust and makes good people even better, and also allows for kind of seamless communication and integration with the lawyers that make the legal decisions. So we do a lot of different types of services, but at the end of the day, we are true experts at legal process and scale.
What's the scope of this? I mean, you've got people I think you have 3 major offices around the world. Is that right? And how many people working for Pangea3?
Ed, you want to grab that?
Yeah, we've got over 1,000 people around the world in offices, both globally as well as onshore in the United States, in India, in Poland, as well as in Minnesota and in Texas. We've also been able to deliver from other locations, throughout the course of our business's history, as clients have had need in the UK and in New York and in other places as well. So our footprint is really broad, and we are always constantly seeking new opportunities to expand our geographic footprint. And the move to EY certainly enables some opportunities there.
So you Ed, you mentioned, or maybe it was, I forget which of you mentioned that you write for Above the Law, but you both write for Above the Law. You both write about alt legal for Above the Law. There's been, since this news has broken, there's been a lot of talk about it, and about potentially the significance of this within the legal industry. So I'm going to ask each of you kind of maybe a little bit of a trick question, which is to put your alt legal columnist hat on for a second and maybe try and take off your Pangea3 hat and comment on if you're writing your column on Above the Law right now, what would you kind of describe as the significance of Ernst & Young acquiring Pangea3? Ed, you want to start with that? Or?
Yeah, I think that it's
question.
A really bold move. It makes a ton of sense. It's sort of a long lost kindred across the industry. The managed services theory of delivering value to clients is something that the Big Four have excelled in for a very long time. Something that EY has had an incredible reputation. It's an area where they've seen tremendous growth, and just the ability to provide advisory resources at scale, and consulting, and and a managed services strategy that makes a lot of sense for their clients to really know their businesses better than they do themselves. And I think that that's it's a lot of the things that made a lot of sense in the legal managed services space that really opened up the abilities to provide access to talent channels and scale in a way that, as Joe had mentioned earlier, in a way that really previously wasn't part of the legal ecosystem. And so those threads are really resonate together. And as a proposition, I think the EY's acquisition of the Pangea3 business makes total sense. There's perfect clarity there. And that's part of why we're so excited to be part of a professional services firm, a firm that really gets it. I'm really grateful for our time at Thomson Reuters. It was a fantastic place to really learn how, real heavyweight in legal approaches the market and understands its users and its clients and its customers. But we're also really excited to join a place where the core DNA is being able to provide really highly proficient, domain experts or domain, competence that spans a lot of scale. And so if I were to put on my above the law hat for a second, I think that there are a lot of easy questions to ask around like, well, what does this mean for legal in general? What does this mean for the legal industry? And there are a lot of answers that will roll off very easily about, what this might mean for law firms and how this changes, the delivery of services. And we can all, quote Susskind or whoever we want to about how things are evolving. But what I really see here is tremendous business value. I think that's what most of our clients are going to see as well, is that there is an incredible professional services firm that works across every function and vertical of our business. And now, adding some serious capability in legal is a totally logical next step. And so I'd look at it more from that perspective, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Joe, with your columnist hat on, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, so I tried to put it together while Ed made his great answer. I think I would come at it from I might make 3 points. I think one, I'd lead with the numbers. EY already has something like 2,400 legal advisors across the globe in 84 law practices. The addition of Riverview added about 100 in an alternative business structure which both does legal process and legal advice. And now you're adding 1,000 plus full-time lawyers from the Pangea3 model who are probably the world's foremost experts in legal process. What you have at the end of the day is a 3,400 lawyer behemoth. I think that would be point one. I think the scale in and of itself is important. And I think it's important to remember where that fits into a company like Ernst & Young, which has 260,000 people. It is still a drop in the bucket, but in the world of law, that is big. And if you understand that they have a vision to grow it more, scale matters in and of itself. Second, I think I'd talk a little bit about the legal innovation paradox, which is something I've talked a lot about in my columns, where it is difficult to get law firms in particular to try to do new things in a billable hour regime. Well, certainly things in the EY world do fall under billable hour, but many don't. There's all types of different pricing models, including fixed pricing models that can be rolled out, especially under the member firms and the 2,400 practicing attorneys, which hopefully will be, a free pass outside of that legal innovation paradox where new things can be brought to market. And then that leads really neatly to 3, straight up innovation. With practicing lawyers all over the world who can give a glean of legal advice. The legal process services that Pangea offers can combine with those in unique ways. And I think it's going to be the client base, which includes, a huge percentage of the largest global companies in the world, that are going to be the spark or the catalyst of that creativity and come to us and say, hey, we would have had to bring on 100 people for XYZ regulatory project, but we see that you have lawyers in most of those countries, and now with your huge legal process team, this also won't be so prohibitively expensive that we can't do it. I think we're going to be able to come up with new things, and that's what drew me to Pangea in the first place. I had been to India many times, and I understood the unbelievable talent and drive of the people, and knew that under the new kind of understanding of the Bar Association of what constitutes the practice of law, there were just so many new services we could roll out. Sure enough, today, 10 years later, I would say about half of what we do, hadn't even been dreamt up yet. And that's even in the world of litigation, where we do things like higher value services, chronology building, deposition prep, which really juice the ability of lawyers and law firms to do more than they ever could and get better results for their clients. I think we're going to have, another like Cambrian explosion of new types of services we've never even thought of before. That's what's most exciting for me, but it's also probably what I would write about.
Right. Well, I look forward to reading that. I don't travel outside the United States as much as you guys do, but when I do, it seems to me that there is a kind of greater awareness of the big four professional services firms as becoming providers of legal services in addition to other kinds of business and accounting services. Here in the United States, I feel like there's less awareness of the fact that that's happening on a global basis. So I'm wondering what your perception is of what this means to the legal market, first globally and then secondly within the United States. So what are maybe take it one at a time, but how do you think this changes the competitive landscape globally within the legal market, and ultimately what does it mean here in the United States?
So
throw it to whoever of you wants to take that first.
I mean, what I would say,
there's a lot there.
There's a lot there. We could break it down.
There's a big one.
I mean,
but we got
maybe start with global and move on. But,
yeah, we can. I think we can break it down a little bit. So, I think I want to actually answer the question narrowly and not go too far afield. This specific move to bring Pangea3 into the EY world doesn't really change much about it doesn't directly change much about EY's footprint as a law advisory practice across the world, other than the things that Joe just mentioned, which is incredible innovation capacity, bringing essentially a huge managed services bandwidth in scale and bring that pipeline into and to really power the existing kind of law advisory practice that exists around the world. But it's not like EY law continues to grow very aggressively around the world, and that's a part of the strategy, and that's great. This particular move essentially just kind of fills out more of the portfolio, and it makes EY a really unique type of player, because there's no one else out there in the industry that has 2,200 lawyers, I think it is, in 84 plus countries that are engaged in that law advisory practice. And then also on top of that, another 1,000 plus people who are going to be coming over and through Pangea3 and a legal managed services function, not to mention, the Riverview transaction that happened earlier in the year. So I think that those pieces make the value proposition in the market really compelling globally and in the US. And by the way, I'll answer the US question also. It doesn't really change anything about, again, in terms of legal practice, it doesn't change anything about the contour of that in the United States on its face, because EY is not in the practice of law in the United States, and neither was Pangea3. And so we both continue to not be in the practice of law in the United States. I think that to the extent that the alternative legal services world is already transforming the practice of law, and we see that every single day. Joe sees it every day with clients. I'm constantly seeing it in the market and the way technology is interacting. That is a massive shift, and it's been well covered. And we've got some really interesting results from a study that we did around really kind of exponential adoption around that, and how that's changing even how law firms strategize the way that they serve their clients, and how legal departments are procuring and right sourcing their legal services. But I would say, in terms of if someone's looking at the kind of market itself for legal practice, because we're not adding lawyers to the law practice globally. It doesn't directly change that footprint other than kind of supercharging it with innovation. In terms of the United States, both sides are not in the practice of law, so this continues to not, change that for either one of us.
I have a couple points to make on this. I mean, these might be personal theories of mine, but I think a lot of what we've been doing with Pangea3, and I think what we're going to continue to do with EY, has a bunch of kind of counterintuitive results in the broader legal market, which I think are fairly unpredictable. There's no question that through legal technology and globalized legal services with process, we're driving down the cost of certain aspects of legal work, but what I think that we're finding, and I think one of the reasons why you're seeing growth in AmLaw again, simultaneous with massive growth in ALSP, I think what we're finding is as we decrease price for certain things, demand actually goes up. So I have a million examples. Some of them are super easy in the world of litigation. Small pharmaceutical companies that have claims against larger ones that simply aren't worth bringing. Based on the traditional cost of litigation. Now you add predictive coding, you add, let's say, a Pangea3, maybe you add some lit finance, and all of a sudden the cost and risks of bringing the case, a valid, winnable case, is worth it, which means the case is brought, which means the defense attorneys are brought in, which means there's more litigation overall. Now, certainly we sapped up some of the work that might have been taken by big law firms 10 years ago, but we also were part of creating new demand, and that new demand was valid legal disputes that simply couldn't happen. The same is true in CLM, and the same is true in regulatory. Sometimes when there's a regulatory requirement that was simply too expensive to handle with traditional law firms or with massive hiring in-house, it was simply ignored and the dice were cast. Now you have a situation where when the price comes down a bit, you make people realize, well, maybe we should be following every rule. And I think you have a number of salutary trends for large law, for in-house, and for alternative legal service providers. I think this will pour gasoline on that situation. It will certainly sap demand in some jurisdictions, and it will release demand in others. But the net result is really going to be interesting to see. I don't think it's obvious.
Sort of like all ships float with a rising tide, or whatever the expression is.
Exactly. Or there's all kinds of interesting stories like that. Like the advent of autopilot led to more pilots because the cost of flights plummeted, and you still needed 2 pilots in a plane because autopilot couldn't do everything. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, that it's going to increase demand. I'm just saying it's not as clear as, well, you're putting lawyers on the other side of the world and taking away tasks that we used to do. Therefore, there will be less lawyers. There's no evidence of that. AmLaw profits are still going up. Now it's affecting some tiers of firms differently than others, but it's certainly not a linear response.
Yeah.
To what is linear growth in the field of alternative legal service providers, or even exponential growth.
Yeah, but doesn't this suggest that law firms need to be rethinking or thinking smarter about how they deliver legal services?
Right.
I mean, the model that you're talking about is one that that does allow services perhaps to be delivered at lower cost and more efficiently. But most law firms aren't operating that way, and as the market evolves, don't they need to be responding to that?
Yeah, I think the answer is that they will either. It's not a if you can't beat them, join them. It's sort of a both. You see both law firms partnering, and we've seen a lot of that actually. And Joe's been really responsible for really getting deep into those discussions with law firms about the way that alternative legal services through a partner like us could really revolutionize the way that they practice and their approach to their own clients. And then there's also some law firms out there that are trying to start their own alternative legal service provider arms and have captive kind of. And so the models are definitely changing. And I think that's kind of the question here is, are the models changing? What
Sure.
you don't see is anyone just not doing any of it. Like you don't see a law firm being like, well, definitely if we put our heads in the sand, we're going to be unaffected. This will definitely be okay. And as much as we're seeing growth in the AmLaw, it's well covered. I think, Bob, you've mentioned this on some of your reporting as well as others. the trend outside the AmLaw 100, sort of the second 100 is not as robust as what we're seeing and at sort of the high end of the market. And that's because the high end of the market, first of all, continues to have, bet the company type matters that will always demand there. And that's kind of the two pilot situation, right? You can't not have that second pilot in the cockpit when it comes to certain things. You're always going to need high end legal advice. But it's also their ability to adjust and pivot and find different economies of scale that are not necessarily a matter of just more timekeepers and more headcount billing more hours. And then you've got others who are trying to actually move into the alternative legal space and become sort of providers in that way and leverage or experiment with the idea that the law firm is the right place to do that. That brings us back to the transaction for 1 second, which I really think that this is an inflection point in the market. I know it's very popular to get on stage and say that it's an inflection point like every single year, but it really is one. We really do see things tipping. The nature of our conversations is changing in a really watershed way. And we think that we're the ones who are kind of poised to step in at this moment. And we think that EY is the place. We really think that we're the ones that can help shape the future of legal services. We think that this is the time, and we think that EY is the place.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, let's continue this week's interview. Well, we had a few weeks ago on this show had Mark Chandler, the chief legal officer at Cisco, and I asked him about ALSPs, and his answer was, I don't like the word alternative when we're talking about them because to me they're just they're another option out there on the market. And I know that you mentioned the Thomson Reuters survey that came out just a couple months ago in January, I think, on the kind of the state of the ALSP market,
right?
Which is it's still I think probably relatively small in the overall scheme of things, but definitely growing and becoming more prominent. I mean, one of the obstacles here in the United States, as you alluded to, Ed, is the regulatory landscape, and right now EY can't practice law in the United States, but there's a lot of talk about that landscape changing, or about those regulations changing, perhaps. Do either of you see that situation changing, and what would be the implications if it did? In other words, if there could be private ownership or private investment in legal services, do the Big Four come whole hog in the United States?
So let me start, and then Joe, maybe if you can pick it up, because I know we
Sure.
both have a lot of thoughts on this topic. I would start out by saying that, off the bat, we can't really comment on whatever EY's strategy is in terms of legal practice in the United States and whatnot. I can tell you that it's not part of this move. It's not part of this transaction. And there's not anything that we're aware of. Obviously, we're still not on the other side of the transaction yet. So the strategy around Big Four and what you've seen some of the other Big Four do is kind of interesting, where partnerships with Fragment and other things like that. There is certainly also kind of the thing that always, and this has been well written about and covered also, but the thing that is always a layer to watch around any of the Big Four is their independence requirements for their audit clients, right? And that introduces like an entirely new obligation in terms of conflict of interest that goes beyond, what even law firms have to deal with. And so there's a lot of things that are in the mix there. I think the thing that I would throw out there as an idea is that legal managed services and how far it can go is really still untested. I don't think that the ceiling has even remotely been defined. I think that there is a way that things used to be done, but I've been asking people this question in sort of Socratic fashion in various conversations at conference circuits or wherever. What really is the practice of law? Like, what's really, really at the center of it? Is standing in front of a judge and representing a client? Is it, confidential legal advice between attorney and client? How many of my law school classmates, upon graduating, went to a large law firm and were listed as, lawyers, but with a little asterisk that says that they didn't have their bar yet, and that they did that for 4 years, even though they had passed the bar exam, because, hey, they're a transactional attorney, and you didn't necessarily need to be a member of the bar to do that. I mean, there are a lot of blurry lines. Two, people in the street can meet up together and form a contract with one another without any attorneys around. More than half the people I saw at the IACCM conferences are as contract managers and commercial managers didn't graduate from law school. Many deal negotiators are not lawyers, and so at some point we need to really stop and take stock of what exactly is the line around the practice of law, and what's possible and what's not, and how much of that has been fully explored. I think that that's still an area of tremendous interest. So I don't want to comment anything, very specifically around the Big Four and legal practice and how highly regulated it is. But I think that there's something around the notion of a highly regulated legal practice that needs to be deconstructed a little bit still.
I think that's a great point. I would just add a few things. I agree with Ed. We can't comment on EY's future strategy, but there are things about the current strategy that I think are pretty eye-opening to lawyers in the U.S. who are afraid about the Big Four coming for their jobs. Nowhere in any of those 2,400 lawyers and 84 member firms do they do any sort of litigation, nor do they plan to in the future. So huge chunks of what we consider the core practice of law for AM law firms is something that EY has already decided not to do, even in places where they do have a license to practice law. I think you have to think about EY as, a giant high-end, consulting and tax advisory company that wants this legal entity to provide legal advice where possible and legal process everywhere, but to connect those to business results in a way that law firms are not trying to really integrate things like contracts with the business team and how to maximize revenue and things like that. It's coming at it from a very, very different angle. And again, just the clearest example of that different angle is that strategic choice not to do litigation in any way, shape, or form. It's just not exactly what our big firms are doing that hit above the law every day. It's a different animal.
Part of the way that the Big Four, I think, or at least EY, deals with this independence issue that you're talking about, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but they structure their law practices as distinct entities. I mean, in each country in which they have a law practice, that practice is a separate entity of some kind, or its own entity, and I may have that a little jumbled, but if assuming it's something like that, where do you fit into all that? How do you fit into the EY structure?
Right. So we are not. Some of that's still a little bit up in the air. So I want to be mindful about. I don't want to kind of say something that may not ultimately be what happens, because I think a lot of those discussions are still ongoing. I can tell you what it's not. And what it's not is we are not going to be forming a law firm in the United States and then be Pangea3 sort of like the law firm. That is not the intention, is not what we're trying to do here. We are a legal managed services company. We will continue to be, the original law company, as
I'm proud of
has
it.
been covered in the past. So that much I'll say for now, and the rest of it I'll kind of leave open and would love to kind of revisit it in the future. We will fit into the kind of core EY service delivery model, which by itself is already really complex and means something different in different countries. But to kind of get to the question behind your question, there's, to my knowledge, no plan to open a law firm and then say Pangea3 is the law firm.
Right. Okay. The Thomson Reuters had bought Pangea3 in 2010 for I don't know. I've read $40 million. I've heard through the grapevine it was a whole lot more than that even. Why did Thomson Reuters want to sell Pangea3?
So I guess I'll take that one. Jim Smith said to the market, I think in Q1 or it was Q4 of last year, that Thomson Reuters was going to be getting back to basics. I mean, we all know that Thomson Reuters, core products are the absolute top of the line research and like legal practice tools. EY, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. I've personally never experienced a company like it, even though I've been in nothing but service organizations my entire life. It is an entire business built on people and selling high-end expertise. And I think that the fit was just too good for both of them. For a company looking to get back to basics and a company looking to grow its legal services, and looking in the market for who could add that scale and expertise, I think Pangea3 was a really neat fit.
Yep.
I'm watching the clock here, and mindful of the fact. Yeah, go ahead.
Stock price, it's gone up a lot in the last few months, and not that that's all because of the Pangea3 divestiture, but I think it is in part due to that strategy of getting back to basics and the things that Thomson Reuters just does phenomenally well.
Yeah, I know we've got just a couple minutes left before we have to wrap up, and I just wanted to ask each of you in just the couple of minutes we have left if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about before we.
The thing I'll just say is I'll double down on something Joe said, and we kind of have been talking around it, but I'm really excited. I am so stoked and I'm so psyched up, and from the people that I've met, I could not be more excited about the idea of being shoulder to shoulder and peers with an army of people whose job it is to make companies, to build them a better working world. That's kind of the tagline for UI. And that's through tax advice, that's through advisory services, that's through transaction advisory services, it's through digital transformation, it's through risk. And as I've started to look under the covers and see what is there, we're speaking lingua franca when we're talking to them. We're speaking the same language, the same business concerns, the same things that we have learned through years and years of really honing in and listening to our clients. We're hearing the exact same thing. It's like we're speaking the same language, and it's not just because we're doing services. It's because we're trying to drive the transformation of our clients' businesses. And I think that that's what's exciting. That's where we're stepping outside of what's been done before. And when you look at other ALSPs or competitors in the market, there's just nobody who's going to have been, advising a company on their IT transformation, advising a company on their digital transformation, advising a company on their risk, on their HR and employment, and then to come alongside and say, yeah, and we can also provide these legal transformation services, ops consulting and managed services, and for us to be this warehouse of really long historical institutional knowledge about our own clients, where frequently we're going to know our clients better than they might even know themselves. And we always hear about legal being kind of siloed from businesses and inside of large organizations, and how they need to be better partners to drive business. But I think that EY, as like this powerhouse of institutional knowledge about the best businesses in the world, to me, that is this gold mine of knowledge and of continuity for our clients, where we can step in and just be part of a world-class firm ranked number one in so many different areas in the way that they're helping businesses change, and get into the general counsel's office and do the same thing. And so I can't emphasize enough how stoked we are and how differentiated this move is in that respect. And we can't wait to get started.
And I'll just add, just to go back to our kind of above the law days. Ed and I do about 2 columns a month, so about 24 columns a year, mostly on brand new legal technology. In a world where legal technology is the buzzword, you'll see in most of my columns I try to use the word legal innovation. It is so complicated and so fast moving that ironically I think that the value of legal services and expertise is also going up. By understanding these technologies, having armies of people to apply them and use them right, just like the best race car still needs the best race car driver. The increased complexity is ripe for a world of expertise, and I think EY being a company of people and experts for people will be more valuable than ever, and it should be a really exciting time.
Well, it sounds like it will be really exciting, and maybe we can get you guys back on in, I don't know, 6 months or so after things, after the transition actually happens, and
that'd be great.
Find out how
love
it's going.
that.
I'd love to keep tabs on it. But thank you
it's gonna
so
be a
much
journey.
for both of you for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it, and it was great to talk to each of you.
Thanks
you,
so
Bob.
much, Bob. We'll see you soon.
We've been talking with Joe Borstein, Global Director of Pangea3, and Ed Sohn, Vice President of Product and Partner Management at Pangea3. A big thanks to both of them for taking the time to be with us today. Thanks also to the sponsors who keep this show running. That's it for this week. This is Bob Ambrogi. Thanks for listening.